Okay, so this is a really interesting piece of news. A few weeks ago, someone left a comment on one of my videos mentioning that they had stopped working on Blender for the iPad, that they have put it on hold. They're no longer working on it. And I had a hard time finding information on this. On Blender's GitHub page for the Apple iPad iOS project, it says this: status, this project is on hold until further notice. Now, before we get too deep into the video, I want to say something quick. I didn't want to make a sky is falling sort of video. That's not what this is. So you don't have to make it to the video to get to the too long didn't read part of this. I want to say I think this is a temporary pause, although I don't have concrete information on that yet. So I checked out this page, I scrolled down and read some of the comments to kind of learn a little bit more about what's going on here. It started 2 months ago with this comment where someone said, I would like to spend some time developing on the side for a Blender project to gain some experience and that sort of thing. Since Blender's an open source project, a lot of people contribute to it. And Dalla Falentio over at Blender said, FYI, I just updated this task description to mention that this project is on hold. That's probably an edit. I think the original thing he wrote here is, thanks for your interest, but we're putting this project on hold for now. The team will instead focus on Android tablets first instead. And this is really the only comment that they've made publicly about what's going on with the iPad project in months. A couple people also kind of followed up with some questions here. Are you able to share why the iOS project is on hold? I was thinking about contributing. Another person says, I would love to know why the project has been shelved as well. And so those are the comments, but I too have the same exact questions. In fact, I reached out to some folks on the Blender team for comment last week, but I haven't heard back yet. So the good news here is that the Android version is still going forward, and that is a lot of work that they have ahead of themselves. But the main things that I want to know at this point is, like they asked here, why? What caused this pause in work? What obstacles did they hit? Or is it a shortage of people to do the work and they decided to like consolidate all into one place on Android? And I'm also curious if this is just on hold for a few weeks or a few months, or if we're talking about something much, much longer. How big of a block is this? And lastly, do these obstacles just not affect Android in the same way, and why? So, little background here. Last summer, Blender announced on their blog that they're working on an iPad and Android version of the app. Very exciting. People were pumped. And understandably so. We have a lot of powerful tablets nowadays, whether you're running an M series processor on an iPad or a Snapdragon processor or an equivalent on an Android tablet. These devices are amazing and they can push out a lot of power. But right now, there's not a lot of pro-level software that can really take advantage of that software. Blender definitely fits that description. So back in August, during SIGGRAPH, which is a big computer graphics conference that's held every year, they showed off Blender running on tablets. They actually demoed some of it. There's some videos online. I'll link those down below in the description if you want to check those out. They're kind of cool. It's a cool idea. And the reception around all of this was very, very positive. It's worth mentioning here that taking any mouse and keyboard based app and making it a touch based app is always going to be a challenge. But then when you take an app that's as interface rich as Blender is and doing that is a Herculean task. It is a massive amount of work. And I would imagine that developing for Android when working on a large team, especially like a distributed open source team with a lot of contributors, is way easier to do on Android than it is on the iPad. If you look at iPad OS, iOS, whatever you want to call it, to install unreleased software, you have to use an app called TestFlight, and that's Apple's app testing app. And in order for users to actually test your app, you have to manually enter like their Apple IDs, their user IDs into this app on your end and manage them and manage their permissions and all sorts of things through that app. It's a lot of work. Whereas on Android, it's a little different. You could just send them a build of the latest app that you're working on and they can sideload it on Android, no problem. So distributing builds is just way, way easier on Android than it is on iOS. So I can see a scenario where if they're trying to iterate faster, if they're trying to solve some of these interface problems and they're just testing things out, going Android first, solving these problems on Android, and then when you've kind of set your path and figured out what you're going to do, then pivot it and bring all of those features over to iOS. That does make a lot of sense. So I'm just speculating here, but that would be my guess as to why they're pausing iOS and shifting over to only Android right now. For open source software, it just kind of makes sense. The other thing that I've been curious about from the beginning is licensing. When you look at an app like Krita, it's an open source drawing app. It launched on Android a few years ago. They are not working on an iOS iPad app because their open source license is not compatible with Apple's App Store rules. I was checking out Krita's forum where they were talking about the issue and some of the things they ran into, and that led me over to this much older post actually on Apple's developer forum, but it still seems to be the problem that they're dealing with today. But this person says here, GPL, that's the type of license we're talking about here, requires you to grant all rights, including source code, to anyone who receives your app, whether you charge a fee for the app or not. They are still entitled to the source code. This is why GPL is not suitable for the App Store. You don't own anything produced under GPL, and because you claim to own your app when you submit it to the App Store, Apple rightly rejects it. Now, this was in September of 2015. I don't know if Apple has changed up some of those requirements at all. There are examples of apps in the App Store that are open source. There's the Mastodon client, which is a Twitter-like social media platform that's more distributed into Twitter. It's been on the App Store for ages, so there must be some kind of workaround here. And since Blender is an open source app, this is the type of things that they think about all the time, that is central to their planning of everything they do. There is no way they had not talked this through and figured this out before they started working on this app, so they must have some kind of workaround figured out here. But again, that's another question I would love to chat with them about. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit here is timing and expectation when it comes to developing software like this. When they announced it back in August, a lot of people in the comments, and especially the comments of some of my iPad reviews that came out this fall, were talking about, hey, I'm going to buy an Apple M5 iPad Pro in order to use Blender, which is coming out soon. They never said it was coming out soon. It's also worth pointing out that a lot of software developers will work in the dark without telling you what they are working on until it's close to release. Open source software is very different. When they start working on something, it's oftentimes to collect people in the community who are passionate about it, who want to work with them to develop the software. So you hear about open source software projects months, years earlier than you do oftentimes with maybe something that's being developed by Adobe or Canva or somebody like that. And that is definitely the case here. They're very early in development. Even though they have prototypes running on iPads and Android tablets they were showing at SIGGRAPH, doesn't mean they were anywhere close to where they need to be to launch this thing. So do not buy an Android tablet or an iPad right now if you plan on using Blender in the future. We have no idea when this is rolling out. This is the original blog post. This is what they had to say there. While the ultimate goal is a complete Blender experience, the initial focus will be based on object manipulation and sculpting. These will be followed up by grease pencil and storyboarding, which are slightly more advanced and require more animation tools. So it really sounds like they were taking this piece by piece by piece, reworking the interface for tablets as they go. And they're taking on the parts where a stylus or a touch interface just makes the most sense. And you're talking about sculpting, very stylus controlled. Grease pencil, you need a stylus really to use grease pencil effectively. Storyboarding is kind of the same way. You're sketching a lot of things out. So all of this is to say, I would not really panic about the iPad version not being worked on right now, being put on hold like this. My guess is that their intention is still very much to release Android and iOS, but also they understand that they're years away from being at a point where they have a fully spec'd out product that they're going to actually be able to stick in the App Store. And this all kinds of makes sense, at least to me. I've worked on teams who are developing software in the past, and in my old job, my old days, and stopping work on one section so you could go work on another section or kind of tackle these kind of problems is just very common in software development. So don't panic, don't freak out. I think everything's going to be okay in the long run until we hear that it's not. So that's what I think. If you want to support this channel and what I do over here, check out my courses over at bradsartschool.com. I have an intro to digital art class, and I also have a learn to draw in 60 days class. If you'd like to learn more, check out my website. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days.